G'day everyone, welcome to Talking Landscape Photography for this evening. We're really excited this evening to have James Stone join us, and James is a fantastic photographer in general, but he's really specialised in the night sky especially, and so it's going to be great to have a chat. Nick and Paul are actually away, so I think this is actually the very first show that we've had where it's only been a solo host and a guest. So thanks for bearing with me, James. It was a little bit disorganized getting set up, but no, it's very good to have you with us. And have you been out on many shoots lately, James?
Thanks for having me on, Nick. It's
you're right.
Good to finally meet you after all this time, even if it's just virtually.
Yeah.
It's such a small place and still haven't managed to bump into you yet.
Yeah.
I was out shooting the bioluminescence earlier on this week, over the weekend, which is always fun to have a play in and a stomp around in your wellies. But apart from that, nothing too eventful, apart from, I guess, the Aurora flight a few weeks ago.
Aurora flight.
I can't believe I forgot about that already.
Oh yeah,
got that in.
It's on an Aurora flight, but nothing, So that what happened there? That sounds amazing.
It was an amazing opportunity. So I got a call just before Easter to say, was I interested in being an astrophotographer on board a flight? It was the first charter flight out of Melbourne down over the Southern Ocean to view the Aurora from 35,000 feet. So it was basically a long haul flight out of Melbourne, going nowhere, landing back in Melbourne the next morning. But we had about 4 hours zigzagging through the Aurora oval, and with all the lights on, lights off outside the aircraft and lights off inside the aircraft. So it was actually pretty good naked eye viewing. They had special permission from CASA to have all the lights switched off, and the pilots pretty much have free reign to fly where they wanted.
Probably not too much air traffic out that way.
No, there's nothing. And it was the first flight for a lot of the air crew on board that hadn't flown for 12 months, and it was a full-on Qantas international service, basically. But
how long were we actually in the air for?
We took off at 9 and landed at 6 the next morning. So it was a full-on long haul kind of deal. I was jet lagged for a week afterwards, I think. Anyway.
Although I guess from also the sleep, but also just the buzzing of seeing.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty chaotic roll on board, I guess. So I was kind of helping everybody to use their gear, and how to take a photo of an Aurora out of an airplane window is not the easiest thing, and something that I'd never done before. But so I spent until about 2 or 3 a.m. running from one end of the plane to the other, trying to help people out. And the pilot got on the phone at one point to ask if I was happy with our position within the Aurora, and I said, "Well, I actually haven't had a chance to look out the window yet."
Quite often the pilot asks for feedback from a passenger in terms of where they should be flying. So that's quite an honour.
It's a pretty cool experience, I have to say. But I basically I didn't even have a window seat on board. I just commandeered a window in business class that wasn't being used, and stuck my camera to the window and pressed go and kind of set and forget. I changed the batteries halfway through, but otherwise I didn't really get a chance to actually shoot much. Just left the time-lapse running and had a look at the end. So it was just too busy.
And did you use like a particular lens? Like I know there's a device called a lens skirt, which you can put over the lens, and then it has. Yeah,
so I got the call just before Easter. And the flight was the week after Easter. So I didn't really have much time to get much gear.
Yeah.
So I'll show you what I used.
Yeah.
I frantically put out a call for suction mounts and lens skirts and all sorts of things, and didn't get any comeback. So I went up to Bunnings and scratched my head, and I actually made a suction mount out of a glass moving sucker from Bunnings with a bit of wood on the back, which I bolted my tripod head to, and stuck that to the window. And that was it. And I had a toilet plunger, which I cut the base out to put over my lens as a lens skirt.
All right. That's a very interesting idea.
And then I just gaffer taped a travel towel over the window to try and cut out a bit of the reflection that was left from the inside.
Wow.
and it turned out all right.
It's kind of good too, because the actual trip was dedicated for Aurora photography. I guess they wouldn't have really minded so much. Whereas if it was a standard commercial flight, then
So you pretty much had
very strangely. So it kind of gives you a bit more permission to try a few different things like that. So that's pretty cool. Can you say how much the flight actually costs for patrons themselves?
So I think seats in economy were starting from like $1,200.
Okay.
And had a sort of seat swap policy, so you'd swap if you didn't have a window seat for the first half, you'd swap over and have a window seat for the second half. So because of COVID, they had COVID marshals on board to try and make sure everyone stayed in their seat. But because we were crew, we had fairly free rein to wander up and down the aisles, and which was nice.
I was actually thinking it would be more expensive than that. So
seats in business were a bit more expensive, but you got to sleep in a nice bed for the way home.
I see. Yeah, that's the cattle class sort of
gets. But I've never been on a flight like it. Like the whole plane was just buzzing. And everyone was so happy just to be back in the air and traveling again. And the whole flight crew, the cabin crew, everyone was just glued to the windows the whole way. It was
wow, that sounds like a great vibe. And then I guess because you're the photographer in residence, as it was, then you're able to actually you were sort of having to help out. So if everyone was good, then you get back to it. But I'm assuming that as things got more and more exciting, that just be more and more demand. Really,
I think I drank 4 liters in the first half of the flight from running up and down so much. So there was another photographer on board who was contracted to take shots for the passengers' use after the fact. So I was more there just to sort of help out and help the passengers, and if I got to shoot some of my own stuff, that was a bonus kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I think that's often a good way with Auroras, like you were saying, running a time lapse, because with Aurora photography or just watching an Aurora in general, like there's often like a sort of a climax to the Aurora where it just is really, really strong, and it's very hard to pick when that's going to be a lot of the time, unless you're watching it all of the time. So if you run a time lapse, you're obviously going to capture the whole event, and so you'll get the best part of the show. And I guess that's another good thing. If you're also helping people out at the same time, you can keep running that time lapse, and even though you're not watching it, you're not actually missing out on it. So that's kind of cool.
I mean, I sort of I take my focus ring down before I got on board, so I knew it was kind of locked and ready to go, and I literally just had to set my exposure and just press go on my intervalometer, and it was left to its own devices after that.
Wow.
But yeah, totally agree. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't shoot time lapse, really, because you're guaranteed to get the bit which has got the best activity. You've got a couple hundred shots at the end of the day you can make a star trail and things from, and you can stack all your sky shots or your foreground shots and just make things a whole lot cleaner. So yeah, I don't know why people don't shoot time lapse more commonly.
I mean, there's probably maybe I know for myself, I like to have a lot of control over where I put the camera and try different angles. But if you're lucky enough to have 2 cameras, then you can obviously let one run as the time lapse and then use the other camera to suss out all of the other details and things. And do you do something similar to that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I either have 2 lapses running at different focal lengths, or one running and then one to shoot stills. But more often than not, I just set it and sit back and watch, because I think a lot of the time, if you can get too carried away in what's going on in the back of the camera and not actually appreciate where you are and what you're seeing. That's the good thing about night photography. Your settings don't really change very much. So once you set your first shot up and you're happy with it, the next 6 hours can be exactly the same, right?
I have to get more into that kind of vibe, I suppose, because I'm always like, I really want to do something all the time, and but I have had a shoot more recently up on Mount Wellington where we had a beautiful Aurora, hiked out to the Rocking Stone and took a shot out there, which I'll show a bit later. And I did set up the time lapse and just sat back and watched, and it's really, when you can actually see it naked eye, it's quite a amazing thing. And also when for you, I guess it's only like probably a few minutes walk from where you live kind of thing to be able to see it. So you're very fortunate there. I probably have to drive about half an hour, but it's still not that bad compared to what some people have to do. So And you've got a great location where you are, because there's a beautiful, near where you're living, because you've got a really lovely flat kind of, I guess, a very shallow bay, and you can get beautiful reflections on that, as well as bioluminescence sometimes as well.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
I think you're located in a very fortunate place.
yeah,
Did you
very
know much
small.
about that when you moved there, or you kind of...
Not at all. No,
Yeah,
not at
right.
all. So I didn't even know you could see the Aurora from Tassie when I moved here.
Yeah.
So I moved down just over 10 years ago now, bit of a midlife crisis, and went back to uni as a mature age student. And it wasn't for a couple of years at uni I found out you could actually see the Aurora from Tassie. And I kind of started looking at space weather, and I headed out one night down to South Arm when the oval was looking big and bright and colourful, and I had a old Canon 350D at the time with a kit lens, and I set up on the beach, and I think I managed to take 3 JPEGs before my batteries died in the cold, and there was just this big arc of green. I just couldn't believe it was there, you know. And I guess that's what sparked my addiction.
So, is it? Did you? You probably always had an interest in photography, but do you feel that maybe I'm putting words in your mouth there, but do you feel like the Aurora and that sort of night photography is actually kind of brought photography much more into your life?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I guess I've always had a camera, but never really, I wouldn't have classed myself as a photographer. And Aurora stuff kind of got me hooked, I guess, and then more into general night sky stuff, and then landscapes and nature is kind of an easy sort of segue when it's daylight, I suppose. Yeah. But yeah, night sky is my passion, I suppose.
Brilliant. And I was wondering as well, like, given that you've also got a background in Antarctic science as well, does that mean that you've been able to capture it actually on the ground in Antarctica rather than also just in the air?
No, not at all. So,
right.
So I'm a veterinary surgeon by profession.
Yeah.
Photography is a hobby that's got out of hand, I guess. But yeah, I moved down to Tassie to go back to uni to study Antarctic science, just for, just like I said, a midlife crisis, I guess.
Yeah.
In the hope of getting work down there at the end of the day, and I would love to overwinter and see Aurora during the daytime. That would be awesome. But I did an undergrad degree first off, and then I went as a tourist after that. So that was midsummer where it didn't get dark, so I then. Yeah. And then I came back from that trip and then signed up to do a master's degree just to punish myself a bit further. And with that, I did a semester in New Zealand at University in Christchurch, and that included a trip down to Hobart-based over Christmas, New Year for a couple of weeks, which was pretty awesome, camping out on the ice shelf. But again, it was daylight the whole time.
I guess that's part of the thing, isn't it? You want to be in an environment like that when the weather's really stable and you can actually see stuff and all of that. But if you're there in winter, it's kind of quite the opposite, where probably a lot colder, and you get plenty of nighttime and probably see the Aurora for hours and hours and hours. But
everyone always asks, did you see it when you're in Antarctica? But no, you don't actually see darkness when when you're there, unless you actually get to overwinter. You don't actually see the sunset.
Yeah, right. Well, that's one thing definitely to consider, and I guess that's I think might pay to go through a bit more of the technical elements for those at home that are kind of not really as versed with Aurora and a bit more interested in some of the science behind it, or at least the planning aspects, before we get stuck in. I'm all about planning, but before we get stuck right into the I guess the imagery and all of that. And what I've actually done, I've got a couple of the apps that I use, and I think James uses as well. So I'll just bring them up on the screen now. So hopefully you can see these two apps here. And so the first one on the left side here is called Aurora Alerts. You can see the title up here. And so at the moment it's saying that there's not much happening for where I am. But essentially what you want with this app is you just want to see all of these gauges go to the red part. And if they're all in the red, then that's indicating that it's going to be pretty good. There's also a thing called a KP index, and that's kind of a, if you actually look into how, what it's all about, it actually gets pretty complicated. So, but basically this goes in a scale, and I think it goes up to 8 or something like that, or 9. But most of the time you only ever see it go to, I guess 4 or 5, maybe 6 if you're lucky. And so the higher the number, the more intense the aurora is going to actually be. I don't know if you have a better description of that, James, at all.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I tend to be guided by the solar wind speed, which is the first dial on the left there.
Yeah.
That's the speed that things are approaching us from the sun. And I tend not to bother heading out unless it's well over 400, 500. Yep. The BZ is the one next door, which again, I don't know too much about. That's kind of the direction of the magnetic field. And we usually want that to be south, so a negative number. Yeah. For it to be useful to us here in Tassie.
Yeah, the more negative it is, I've heard it described as like the gateway for the aurora to be able to be seen. And so if the BZ isn't in the right position or alignment, then it's just that you're not going to have any chance. So you really want this to be in the red, or you want it to be in negative number, and the more negative it is, then the better it gets. And apologies for anyone at home that is a space weather nerd, and these descriptions are probably awful, but I'm prepared to take that feedback on board. Yeah, and so that's so in terms of the KP index, it's more of my understanding, it's more of a North American number.
It's more of a global average, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I don't tend to get too hung up on that. I mean, it tends to correlate a little bit. If it's KP 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, then you're quite happy, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to see an aurora at KP 1. Yeah. Because the Hobart KP index is a little bit different to the global average, I guess, at any one time.
It's much better. I actually I don't mind this app. I think this one's a bit more more of a user-friendly sort of app, where it's really easy to look at the gauges and see what's going on. You've also got a long-term forecast here, and this is basically showing what's happening over the next 27 days. And so again, it's not a given by any stretch of the imagination if the aurora is actually going to be there. But you can see here, you'd want to be considering about going out and seeing the aurora on May 13 and May 14, for example, with a big 6 there. So getting a 6 is a really, really nice number. So that's really saying that whatever you're doing on May 14, or especially around the place, is worth having a bit of a plan in advance. And that's one of the good things about aurora chasing, is that because of the way that the solar energies emitted and the way that the Earth rotates, you do get they can plan in advance or know in advance when that energy is going to be interacting with the Earth's magnetic field again. So that's a very terrible explanation. I'd love to. I've got a good friend, Ben, who's just an amazing source of information when it comes to this, and he can actually very eloquently say how all of this stuff works. But if you look into it, you'll see why it's a bit hard to talk about. It's very complicated. Yes, but it's definitely something interesting to look into. But so that's the actual graph that will give you a pretty good idea of what's coming up and help you to plan for things. And then you have these graphs as well, which is, James was just referring to the auroral oval. And so you can actually see that we're pretty lucky in Australia, because this auroral oval is actually very heavily skewed towards New Zealand and Tasmania over here. And so it is actually showing a bit of activity even just right now. And so that'll switch around, and that's sort of like obviously the really intense part. But when you get a very strong aurora, you'll see that oval go more of a red color. And when you see that going red, it's going to be pretty nice. So that can be,
that's the kind of area that we flew down to.
Oh, right. There you go. Yeah, just in that sort of patch there. Yeah. So that's definitely another good little tool, again, just to gives you a visualization of how far off that sort of activity would be. You can sort of understand that the arc moves like that. So how much sooner that's going to be coming over to Tassie. And then these are other numbers that, or these plots give you a bit of an idea of basically what the gauges were doing on the first screen, but just showing it in a more of a trend, I suppose, over time. So again, it just gives you a bit more information. The other thing you can do is actually set alerts. So if there's any auroral activity happening, you'll actually get a push notification, and that'll help you to understand if it's by no means saying if you go out now you'll see an aurora, but what it's saying is that there's definitely some activity happening, and whether or not it's strong enough for you to be able to capture with the camera is another thing, but at least it gives you an indication that there's something going on. And so that can be quite handy as well. I don't really find it amazingly accurate for that kind of stuff. My other thing, which I don't have on this, is actually like some of the Aurora Facebook pages as well, which can be very useful just in terms of getting heads up. And that's where you get all of the space weather geeks sort of talking about likelihoods and things like that. And then they'll often talk about the cloud and the weather, which obviously you can have all of the conditions right that you want, but if you have a cloud in the sky, then you're going to be out of luck. So then this next app is Space Weather Live, and this one is, I would say it's a bit more for boffins, or a bit more technical in that sense. You've got a whole bunch of parameters here. You've got the auroral oval, this time interpreted, rather than it being sort of flat on that side, it's interpreted like with the flat world map there. The hemispheric power, I guess the bigger that is, the better. So that can help you to understand, I don't know exactly how that relates to things, but you just want to see big numbers, basically, see it going yellow and red, and that's pretty nice. What I really like with this part is looking at the real-time solar wind, because there's satellites out in the orbit, and they're actually obviously further out than they're able to take measurements and show what's coming and about to hit Earth. So you get an advance warning essentially. And so what that means is, if you're looking at something like BZ, which we're just indicating is a parameter that is very useful to know. If you look at this graph here, you can see that the BZ's actually going below zero here, which is what you want for an aurora. And this is the current Earth time on this line. And basically that's in the future. So this is, unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is in UTC, which is the, I guess, the universal time around the world. So you sort of have to interpret that to local time. But with this, it's saying that, but you can sort of infer, like that's 8:30 and that's 9 o'clock. So 8:15 would be here. So you can sort of say, like in about 5 to 10 minutes, the BZ is going to drop to, -2. So that's not very significant in terms of seeing an aurora now. But if you were to see a huge drop coming, then you could actually infer that the aurora is going to get much, much stronger in X time, based on how much this is, how much space there is along that graph there. So that's actually really useful, just to know if you should pack up and go, or if you don't want to pack up and then 5 minutes later it takes off. And this can sort of help you to understand if there is something just about to happen. So I look at that one quite often, and it seems to be relatively accurate and helpful. I mean, it is data. It's actual data. It's not a forecast. It's something that has been measured. So, so that's the good thing about it. Again, more stuff that helps you to understand what's going on. And normally, if you see everything go red or good numbers, then that's what you want. And moon phases as well will obviously be quite important, because if you if you don't have, like last quarter is quite nice, but if you're having sort of full moon or anything like that, it makes it a lot harder to see the aurora as well. Just like astrophotography in general, you want to have darker skies if you can help it. Although, having said that, I've shot the aurora on a full moon before, and that hasn't been it doesn't look as spectacular, but it still can be done. Yeah, so that's kind of just a brief outline of this particular one app as well. You can really nerd out on what's happening and where the flares are, and how long that's going to be before it hits Earth and stuff like that if you really want to. But I tend to just look at this one, and that helps. But as James and I were discussing before the show, often the best thing to do is just, if you know that there's a pretty good chance, you might as well just head out and give it a go anyway, because you just don't really know what might happen at the end of the day. And there's been instances where all of the numbers are saying great things, and so something should be happening and nothing happens for whatever reason. And sometimes that there's a little bit of activity, but it actually puts on a much bigger show than what's expected. Unfortunately, what tends to happen most is that the numbers look all good and then nothing happens. But the probably the best indicator, I think, is actually when you can see that people in New Zealand are posting that an aurora is happening, and especially if that happens while it's still daylight here. So that basically, if they're seeing the aurora just after sunset in New Zealand, and then you want to, that basically means that as soon as the skies get dark over here, we should be able to see it too, because there's actually measured or observed incidents of the aurora. So that's great because it gives you time to mobilize, get into position wherever you want to be. At sunset, you can shoot sunset and then wait, and then as soon as the sky is dark, hopefully the aurora will be there. And we had one quite recently that was just like that, and it was a really lovely show. I don't know if you got out for that one, James.
I think I was up north and it was cloudy.
Oh no. Oh dear. Yeah, it's I think I had a friend actually who was out in the Tasman, and something similar happened to him. And so that's where when you know something's going to happen, it's very important to check all of the cloud forecasts and be really clear on where all of that activity is, because then you can drive to a location where the cloud isn't. And so that on the, and sometimes unfortunately that means it's on the other side of the state.
Yeah, I've had a few instances where I've left work and driven for 5 hours to Cradle Mountain, only to find that it's petered out by the time you get there. Yeah. But other times where I've headed to Freycinet or up to the northeast, and it's been the only clear part of the state without any cloud cover, and you get lucky. So just
did you do that for April 20? There's one really famous, or not famous aurora, but one, probably the biggest show I've seen since I've been here. You've probably seen quite a few that big, but on April 20, 2018, I think it was, we had an absolutely massive aurora, and I'd actually only just got back from Norway in March, and then seeing the big aurora over there, and then all of a sudden we had a massive one here. Was that the one where that looked like it that we used for the thumbnail for the show, the beer barrel one?
Yeah, 20th of April, 2018. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, because that's the other interesting thing about aurora, like when they do all, like certain, like especially the big one on April 20, it actually had it's quite distinctive, and so if you see an aurora shot, you can actually recognize it as being from that event.
Yeah, they're all completely different, hey?
Yeah, so that's another pretty cool thing that you can do, because they do manifest so differently.
Yeah, I guess I tend to get a bit fussy now. Like when I first started out, any hint of activity, no matter how much cloud was in the sky, I'd be out. And then when you see things like that one, or there's another good one on October the 7th, a few years before that, which was just a crystal clear night all night, and the aurora went all night, and it was just. And when you see things like that, everything gets compared to October the 7th. Yeah, and it's not going to be like that. I'm not bother going out. I'll stay home in front of the fire instead.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's like when you have a fine wine, and then you have something that's not quite as good, and you're ruined after that point, because you realise that you know what good is. But I think it's definitely something where you lost my train of thought, but certainly when you get those evenings where it's just clear all night and you've got a lot of activity, it's just a beautiful thing. And having to fight with cloud is a real pain in the butt, that's for sure. And that's why these apps that I was just showing are really great, because it can give you an idea of how big it's going to be, and whether it's worth your time. And if it's not going to be a particularly big one and you're going to be wrestling with cloud all night, then it might be worth giving it a miss. Of course, if you're someone that's never seen it before, then that's a totally different scenario, and you'll obviously want to battle with the cloud. It's actually
that decision is easier to make, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it's super rare for people to come down and visit a place like Tassie and actually be able to see the aurora, because it is quite. It's probably going to become more and more prevalent, but it's definitely something that is a challenge to plan. You know, you do hear about people trying to put events to different like auroras happening, and it just doesn't really work that way. I mean, I'd love to be able to run aurora workshops or something like that, but it'd just be a total
I've only done a couple of workshops, and fortunately both times I've run them, and aurora was actually coincided, which has been quite curious, but it doesn't happen very often. Hey?
No, I mean, I have had one where it was an astrophotography workshop on Bruny Island, which, by the way, we have one coming up in July. So get in touch if you're keen to go over to Bruny and shoot some astro. But we actually did get a bit of aurora. But yeah, you're just very lucky if that happens, I think.
And it's kind of hard to concentrate on the workshop when when there's an aurora going on.
Well, that's right. It's it does get pretty intense. And a place like Bruny as well, like you're really far south, and probably the furthest south you can sort of just drive up to and photograph. I think you can probably get further south if you went to Lion Rock or something on South Cape Bay. Yeah, well, there you go. But yeah, it's just not quite as accessible, I suppose. Whereas the lighthouse, which is that was definitely one of my favorite shots ever, James, that one with you in the light. Well, it wouldn't have been you probably in the lighthouse. It actually is you. Oh right, so you were just running a time lapse.
My epic selfie.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I spent 6 weeks on Bruny and didn't have an aurora once, but but they had some pretty cool night sky stuff.
Yeah, oh, that's epic.
Caretaking down at the lighthouse, I had a key to the lighthouse and go in after hours and light it up, and so yeah, it's pretty cool.
Oh, that's pretty magic. And the other thing that's probably worth mentioning as well, just from a technical perspective, is how there is actually kind of like a solar cycle, and we're actually coming out of what was called the solar minimum, and we're actually moving obviously towards the maximum, because it sort of ebbs and flows like that. And I think, I always forget how many years it is. Is it 11 years?
It's supposed to be 11 years. I don't know how strict that is, but we've had 2 or 3 years of very little activity, so it's really nice to see it picking up again this year. Yeah.
And so what that really means is that the auroral intensity is really just going to only get more and more as will become more and more intense, or more and more events of aurora happening as we go. I don't know what I must make it about 2025 or something when we're sort of at the maximum, I suppose. So we really have noticed the activity picking up quite a bit lately. So I think that, you know, that's quite exciting to think we're nowhere near the maximum, and yet we're seeing quite a big increase in activity. So it makes you realize how good the maximum is actually going to be, and hopefully get some really nice large huge shows as well, which would be really great. So
yeah, I almost feel sorry for people that have just sort of started getting into it the last 2 or 3 years, and there's been just nothing to see, or nothing. Nothing very exciting to see.
I moved down here about 4 years ago, and so I got a little bit of aurora, and then we hit the minimum, and then it was like, you know, you might get we were probably getting aurora every month, and then when the minimum sort of came through, it was like you're lucky to get a decent one every 3 months or so, maybe even longer than that. Certainly over COVID, I think there was only a handful of sort of not even that great ones anyway. So it wasn't like we missed out on too much, which was kind of one of those silver linings, I suppose. It would have been worse. Imagine if it was through the solar maximum or something like that. Everyone's just inside and looking out, probably see it naked eye out of their bedroom or something, and just freaking out.
I took my essential exercise during lockdown just after dark with all my camera gear, went for a 6K walk to take a photo of an aurora. But that's my daily exercise,
I think, isn't it, with that sort of scenario? But I think we've covered off a bit of those technical aspects anyway. Might get into some pictures, and I'm really excited to see some of the shots that you've got, James, just to share.
Yeah, sure.
And also time lapses too. That's the other thing that I really appreciate about your work, is that, yeah, you've put together some absolutely beautiful time lapse work as well. And that's just a really good lesson to what we were talking about if you can run a second camera as a time lapse and then use the other one to take the photos, then you can have a really great video at the end of it as well.
Yeah, it really helps you see how dynamic it is and how much it does change, because it's quite hard to picture that with the naked eye sometimes. And even as a still image, you get a nice image, but you don't always appreciate how much things change minute by minute.
Yeah, and you can also go, oh, hang on, there's a really weird beam coming up.
You
don't really notice it so much in a single frame, but
I find the number of satellites and meteors and stuff, there's barely a frame goes by where there's not something moving in the sky, and it's you don't see any of them when you're out.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You're just catching out the corner of your eye, but it's almost every frame has got something in when you get down to it. But yeah, I'll start off with a few pictures if you like, and
that'd be
story, and then but yeah, a lot of them are better as time lapse. So yeah, show a bit of that too.
I could put that first if you want to. The time lapse might be a good intro, actually.
Sure. I've got a huge long compilation of things which I've re-edited this year, but I've got a few sort of highlights in amongst it. And probably a couple of my favorite events were around that October 7th event that I was mentioning, which I think was 2015. And it was just amazing. So maybe start with a bit of that and go from there.
Sure.
The whole thing is pretty weird. So this is the one I that's probably one of my favorite events, I guess.
Yeah. So that was all around south of
that was all South Arm, yeah. I kind of like the Aurora over water, just for that reflection.
Getting the colours reflected. And
I think it's often easier to see naked eye in the reflection sometimes, particularly a lot of the beams I find stand out because you haven't got all the distraction of all the stars.
Yeah.
So you tend to see when the activity changes a bit easier in the reflection, and you kind of get double the show for your money, really. You get
and you've got some one of my favourites of yours is it's almost like a double aurora where you've got there must have been so calm in the bay.
I've got
that sort of like a double. I don't know.
It's almost like a double rainbow.
Yeah.
Which was it wasn't even dark by that point, and I could see it as I was driving there in the car, and I thought, hurry up.
Oh wow.
Kicked off even before it got dark, and it was a pretty cool night. I'll pop some pictures up.
Yeah, please. So I guess the show like that one, how many auroras do you think you have to see before you see a big special one like that?
Well, it depends how dedicated you are, I guess. It could be your first one and you'd be very lucky and then disappointed ever after. But that was probably a few years in for me.
Yeah.
And I think I've probably got 2 or 3 events which are up there that are ones I gauge all the rest against. I mean, they're all special and they're all pretty nice to be out amongst.
Yeah.
And they're all different, but you know, some are just a green glow and that's it, and some are really active, and some are really high and really colourful, and others are short lasting but really pretty dramatic, and some last all night and keep you awake the whole night. This was the first Aurora shot I ever took.
Oh wow!
This was on my old 350D and one of 3 shots before the camera died, and that was what I started with, and that was kind of what inspired me to then get a bit of a better camera, and I stepped up to a 7D at that point, but still had a f4 lens and wasn't really getting great results, but I was experimenting with some panos, and this was quite a spectacular show one night.
What's going on there? On that left?
That's what I thought at the time. Like, this is on the beach at South Armageddon, and you could see the green glow in the distance on the horizon, and then you could see this massive, great big, obviously red to the naked eye, bit off to the east there, and then over Kingston there was this big bright white pillar of light, and I thought it was a searchlight or a spotlight of some sort. I didn't realize it was part of the Aurora for quite a while.
That is Steve.
Yeah, that's a Steve.
Yeah, I can't remember what it stands for, but it's an acronym.
Something thermal emission, something or other.
Yeah, I think whoever named it had a bit of a sense of humour calling it.
Absolutely.
But they happen. Was it to the east of the Aurora?
I usually see it in the west.
Oh, the west. Yeah.
Yeah, I usually see it in the west here. Whether it's east in the northern hemisphere, I'm not sure. Yeah. But yeah, it's always in the west for me. And this was before I was shooting time-lapse stuff, but it would have been an incredible event to time-lapse, but not that it would have all fitted in one frame, because this is a 180-degree panel or more.
Oh yeah, right.
But wow, it would have been spectacular.
Did any sort of a space weather scientists or anyone kind of comment on what that big red pillar of light could have been? Or
people always call it a SARARC. I don't know what that stands for. And I don't know whether it is or not.
It's a documented phenomenon then, by the
I think so, yeah. But it was so high and it was so big and it didn't move, it was just there.
I think that's probably an interesting point too, that there's still a lot that people don't really know about the Aurora. And so when you're out there, you're almost you're not only a photographer, but you're a citizen scientist as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're capturing all of these phenomena that are still kind of being worked out, and Steve's one of those, which you can see on the right there, and also the amazing pillar there on the left. I'd love to see that one day. And they all have there's some very unique sort of shapes, and kind of there was the Aurora more recently. There was actually a big blue beam, giant blue beam, I think they call it, giant blue ray, GBR, and they actually started up a Facebook page about the giant blue ray, and they were actually trying to triangulate where the ray originated from and work out a bit more about it. And so these are actually just they're not full-time scientists or anything like that. They're just really passionate about understanding space weather a bit better, and so that's pretty cool. So
yeah, there's a guy called Michael, I forget his surname, is a guy in Germany who's been researching Steve a lot, trying to work out its altitude in the atmosphere, and he's been using a lot of time-lapse from Tassie, New Zealand and the Northern Hemisphere, and trying to triangulate the times that it's occurred and the latitudes that it's been photographed from. So he's had quite a few of my shots for that, and Ben Swanson, I know, has submitted quite a few as well. And he's published quite a few papers about that in the last 12 months or so. So that's pretty cool to get involved with, and I mean, it's way above my head in terms of the physics involved, but it's quite interesting that it's still quite a recent phenomenon, or I guess recently discovered phenomenon. It's probably been occurring for millennia, but
it was exactly right, isn't it? But it just goes to show, how I guess short-lasting these events actually are, and some of them are rare, and you just don't really know what you're going to see. And I guess that's part of the excitement of going out there and chasing, and you just don't really know what you're going to see at all. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I know James Garlick has got an awesome picture of this night.
Oh, right.
Much better than mine because I didn't know what I was doing at the time. But yeah, he's got a fantastic image of this night.
Massive fan of James's as well.
Me too. Yeah, he was a big help in the start because
yeah.
this is when I was still using f4 glass, and I think this is probably still on my 350D. Maybe it might have been when I'd stepped up to the 7D, but it was certainly still using really cheap, pretty ordinary glass. So.
Well, that's a good thing to mention as well. I guess that you don't have to have the latest and greatest gear to be able to capture it, and even these days, people even managing to get it on their mobile phones. With
I was really amazed on the flight the other week how good the results some people were getting from the newer smartphones.
Yeah.
It almost made me feel like just throwing my camera away and getting a decent phone. It's so much easier just to point and shoot.
Yeah. Oh no, it's definitely getting there, and I think that you're saying that tongue in cheek, but I doubt that they'll get to the level, just from a sheer physics perspective, of the sensors being so small on the phones and how low light Aurora really are. But that's it's definitely getting to the. I think it's just going to get more and more popular because of that, because people don't even have to go out and buy a new camera. They can just hold their phone up and press the button, and there's a picture of the Aurora. They won't even need a tripod or anything. So it's really getting to that point now, and so I can see Aurora chasing becoming more and more popular because of that.
Absolutely.
Especially with the solar maximum coming.
Yeah.
The last solar maximum, that's how long it is. Mobiles probably weren't really capable of taking any photos of the Aurora at that point.
Mine's
see how quickly things can change. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens that way.
Yeah, agreed. So I think I stepped up to 7D, and I finally stepped up to some 2.8 gear and got into shooting panos then for quite a while. Again, didn't really venture very far from home. This is still southbound, but just it's this time of year. This was May the 1st, this shot, and just a nice time of year to get the Aurora completely underneath the Milky Way arch.
Yeah, I absolutely love that when you can get the Milky Way and the Aurora in the same shot. And then I always think of it there being a trifecta and getting the Milky Way, Aurora and Bio all on the one shot. And you're probably in one of the best places in Tassie to be able to try and pull that off, I think, with
I've managed that a couple of times, but it's it's certainly not very common.
Yeah, the hat trick. Yeah,
pretty special when it does happen.
Oh yeah,
I'll pop that in a time lapse as well. Actually, I'll pop that up in a bit.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
This was probably one of my favourite displays.
Wow.
To give you an idea, this is, apart from being stitched into a pano, this is straight out of the camera, no post-processing at all. It was that spectacular and that multicoloured, and it was just phenomenal. It was probably the highest in the sky that I've seen.
Yep.
And just the colours were incredible that night. This was probably just when I was starting to get into time-lapse, but it was so big in the sky, I couldn't get it all in one frame, so it was more just shooting panos until it died down a bit, and I set up a time-lapse after that.
Wow.
But wow, it was just spectacular.
And then because it's got those beautiful, like, just mirror reflections, it just really amplifies the colour and the
this is probably my favourite location to shoot. That's close to home, but it doesn't have water all year round or every year. But when it does, it's a horrible place to go and shoot. It absolutely stinks, but it's and you can't put your gear down. You've got to wear, you can't sit down or take a break. You've got to be standing in the water the whole time. But it does make for some pretty spectacular foreground.
It's probably worthwhile saying that it's good to invest in a pair of gumboots for a shoot.
Absolutely.
Like that. Not having to tiptoe in your hiking boots or something, hoping that you don't get wet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this shot, this has a bit of everything. It's got the, I think must be a bit of moonlight up there, and then Venus and a bit of the core just showing through, and then the International Space Station whizzing off to the left there, and Orion just rising on the far left. This is probably one of my favourite images, I think.
Yeah, it really shows doing that. It must be about 180 degrees or something like that there.
Yeah, it would be all of that and maybe a little bit more, actually.
Oh, right.
It will be at least that. But just really really an amazing night.
Mm.
So this was back in 2014, I think.
Right.
But yeah, I've not seen one to match that yet in terms of height and color.
And how high do you reckon that was in the sky, like the top of the pink there?
Well, that was shot with an 11mm on a crop sensor.
Yeah, so you're looking about 16 to...
And it's almost cut off the top and the bottom of the reflection. So it's hard to get it all in with that. That's a pretty wide field of view.
Sure is.
So that's 11mm in portrait. So it was pretty high.
That's great.
I guess things. I don't really classify myself as a photographer, I guess, unless I don't want to tell people I'm a vet, and I tell them I'm a photographer. But this again is down at South Arm, and I publish my time lapses on Vimeo just for fun, not to really market myself.
Yeah, it's well worth checking James up on Vimeo. It's got some, all of his. Is that pretty much all of your work where it goes, James? Or?
Yeah, I started putting a few up on YouTube just recently, but Vimeo tends to be where I put most of it.
Yeah.
And I got contacted by a marketing company saying they wanted to purchase the time lapse of this night for use by Google, and I thought they were joking, and I almost just trashed the email and thought it was just a scam. And then I thought, I checked out the company that sent it, and they seemed pretty legitimate, and sort of inquired back how much they wanted to pay for it, and almost fell off my chair when they replied. So
wow.
This is when I had to get an ABN, and that's when I thought,
started to get real.
Maybe there is something in the photography life after all.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I kind of started taking things a little bit more seriously, I suppose, and putting a bit more effort into what I posted, just in case it did pay off at the end of the day. I've not had anything like that since, but
I know. Well, you only need that one, and it's enough to get you thinking, isn't it? So,
yeah. I mean, I don't actively go out and market myself or sell anything. I'd sell a bit of stuff on stock, but it's all passive income. It's certainly nothing that I rely on day to day. I think I made 20 cents this week through stock photography. So it's not my day job by any means.
I think it's still.
But if people want to contact me and buy stuff, that's fine,
Oh, of course. But it's case in point. I mean, just get your work out there. You just never know that's the power of social media these days. Just you really never know who's looking. And
that's right.
It can be all the way to the biggest companies in the world that are always looking for unique shots and different things. So it's always good to get amongst it.
Yeah. So the time lapse of this is nothing special. It wasn't a particularly active Aurora. It was just that green band, really. But it got used by Google Asia Pacific wide in their advertising campaign, so I was quite happy with that. And it was just a tiny little bit on a computer screen in the background, so it wasn't even anything showcasing it really.
Well, that's a great tree too. That it's always good to have a nice subject, because
it's a bit annoying with all the cars going
Aurora and maybe some Milky Way, but it's another thing to incorporate a really interesting subject or foreground into the shot. So that's really fantastic.
Yeah, I guess I'm always on the lookout for a good foreground with a southerly view, but I must admit I get pretty lazy and just tend to stay local a lot of the time, unless it's
why not
something big. But
well,
I am getting a bit bored of my local locations.
Go too far anyway.
They're getting pretty busy nowadays, so I tend to head a bit.
Well, that's right. I guess for probably don't want to make it any more popular, but probably the most popular, I would say, one of the go-to locations for Aurora photography in Tassie is at Goat Bluff on South Arm. So it's just sort of made for it, really, in terms of having a car park and a good sort of high perspective to look out over. That's a good sort of spot to end up if you're not quite sure where to go. But
also a pretty dangerous spot if you don't.
You've got to stay behind the safety railings, and that's.
I know I've almost fallen off the cliff there a few nights.
Right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. But definitely quite a popular location to go. I guess there's certain hot spots where you have a really interesting foreground and then a south-facing aspect. And quite often you'll see in the Aurora groups, they'll go, "Oh, where do I go to see the Aurora?" And it's kind of like, well, anywhere where it's dark and there's no cloud and you can face south and you're there. So
I used to answer that question, when you post in the alerts group that there's an aurora happening and people you ask where, you should say in the sky. You're not going to drive from Burnie down to South Arm. You've got to go somewhere local that's got a clear southerly view. That's it. That's all you need, right?
And then I mean that's not even restricted to Tasmania. If you're getting really big aurora, Victoria's totally on the cards. I think I've seen some great shots coming out of sort of the Gippsland area and in that sort of eastern Victoria area, and even further north in New South Wales and WA. I think I've heard of people capturing it from Uluru, which I'm not sure if it's been verified or not, but anywhere where you've got a really clear view of the southern horizon, and you've then on a really big show, you can see it quite a bit further north. So
I think if you're keen, you've got to have a location in mind before you head out. You can't just go out in the middle of the night in the dark with somewhere you've never been and expect to get a good shot.
Yeah.
You've got to have scouted it beforehand or be set up before dark to really know what you're going to get.
Exactly.
If you want something that's good. I mean, if you
It's
just want to
kind of
see and capture the aurora, fair enough. But if you want to get an image out of it that you're happy with, I think you need to make a foreground or your location before you go.
Absolutely. Yeah,
particularly on the coast down there. Also, it's just too dangerous to walk around there in the dark.
That's right. You do your recce, and so you know where all of the sort of the pitfalls are, I guess, literally, and where you can sort of come a cropper, and so you can work out where the best places to go. And this tree as well is a case in point, because it might look easy to see a tree like that, but in the dark you've got no idea where any of the trees are. So that's one of the hardest things to try and find an interesting looking tree in pitch black. So it's just not going to happen.
That happened to me a couple of weeks ago, actually. I was up in Scottsdale and I knew there was going to be an aurora that night, and I know there's a really nice dead tree just on the side of the road. I've seen it every time I drive into town. And could I find it in the dark? I knew pretty much where it was, but I got out of the car every 50 meters and I just couldn't see it. It was 50 meters off the side of the road and I couldn't see it anywhere. And I couldn't find anything else that was worthwhile foreground, and the cloud came in, so I went home.
I do have a habit of getting on Google Maps and putting a pin on exactly where exactly where some of those spots are, but it's not always possible while you're driving or anything like that to exactly pinpoint where something is. And it might be easy to have other visual reference points of where it might be during the day, but then at night even those visual reference points aren't there. So
that's right. I mean, I know exactly where it is now for next time, but
exactly.
It wasn't to be that night.
That's great, and what a tree. And that's that composition's really nice to do. That's going to be, you wouldn't only really be able to do it this time of year, where you get the eastern Milky Way rise on the left, and then you've got a central subject, and then you've got the aurora to the right. And so that's a really nice composition to get. And then sort of around September, October, you can get it in reverse, where you've got
this one where it's
there you go,
setting in the west.
The western falls, so the Milky Way, rather than looking like a backslash, it's looking like a dash across the horizon. And beautiful footprints there too, to sort of lead the eye towards the Milky Way. So
it's quite nice this time of year. I thought, well, this must be September, October time, I guess, when it's towards the end of Milky Way season, and it's really low on the horizon, so it's really nice and easy to fit into a pano.
Is that the light there on Betsy Island? Is that? Do you know if that's just to warn ships not to go?
Yeah, that's Blackjack Rocks, sort of between Goats Bluff there and Betsy Island. There's a little outcrop of rock, which is where one of the Incat catamarans ran aground.
Right.
Years ago, quite embarrassingly.
Oh, no.
So
they're just letting people know about that. Fair enough. That's and I guess that's another good thing. Rather than going up on the bluff where you might fall off, you can always go onto the beach, where it's obviously a lot safer on the beach. So that's another great idea as well.
You've got to watch out for big waves down there. There's quite often a rogue one that will come
one
in.
of the creeper waves. Putting your gear down and you forget about it, and then you're scrambling to pick up your bag at the last minute.
Absolutely.
That's fun.
There's been a few nights where I've wondered whether my camera's still going to be where I left it.
Right. Yeah. No, that's great. It's beautiful. Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's the same trees. So I don't tend to vary my locations too much when I'm at home, but it does make for a good foreground. This was St. Patrick's Day a few years back. or the day after St. Patrick's Day, maybe. There was a big Aurora St. Patrick's Day, which is visible over most of the UK, I think.
Oh.
But it was cloudy here in Tassie that night, but clear the night after. And again, yeah, it was a really colourful show. And
is that a car that lit that up, or you lit that up?
Yes, no, it's all lit by passing cars. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Which is quite annoying in a time lapse, but it does make for some easy light painting.
I actually really don't like it, as long as the light's not too harsh. I think car headlights are actually can be quite good to light up subjects.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
these would be a kilometre or so away when they first illuminate this tree, so it's quite diffuse light and it's quite soft. But as they get closer, it's a bit bright and a bit harsh. But
that's right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's quite an easy light painting technique, really.
Very passive. Yeah. Beauty.
Yeah, same location, South Arm, but yeah, nice bit of galactic emu and some nice beams. And this is the October 7th event with the bio and the amazing structures of the Aurora. Is
that a still from the time lapse, or is it?
Yeah, it's all stills from the time lapse. So this is where the dancing idiots get out and do their pirouettes under the stars.
It's magic. No, it's
I shoot a lot with a friend of mine, Jo, from Blackpool Photography. She's a local of mine. We go out and start doing funny little dance moves.
Oh yeah, with the bio.
Just to pass the time.
So special. And I think that really adds to it too, when you can put that human element into the frame as well. So,
yeah.
And I guess too, with running it as a time lapse, you can kind of pick the frames where you would kind of making the moves that were right. It'd be very hard to coordinate just a single shot to do that, but because
to do a single pirouette takes at least 20 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
By the time you know, it's half a dozen moves to get your arm above your head. And that's 20 seconds a frame, and it takes a good 20 minutes to do a pirouette. And half of that time you're facing the wrong way, so you can't see what the Aurora's doing. But yeah, the time lapse of this night actually won the Marlin Awards in 2016, and David Marlin discussed it as whimsical.
Yeah,
with the people dancing on the beach.
So that for those that don't know, the David Marlin Awards are probably the premier astrophotography competition in Australia. So yeah, to do well on that is it's no mean feat. So, and they do often have I don't know if they have an Aurora category every year, do they? But they did have an Aurora special category in the past as well.
Yeah, this was just part of the animated.
Yes,
animated section rather than being specific to Aurora stuff.
Yeah,
which was probably the category to enter because there's only less than 10 probably entries that year.
Yeah.
So it wasn't big competition.
Still, I don't know if you saw Phil Hart's the other year, but I mean, it doesn't mean anything about quality though. Some of the stuff is just absolutely gobsmacking.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I went to the awards in Parks and was sitting on a table with Phil, and his stuff's just sensational.
Yeah.
I think he's a judge this year, I think.
Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah.
But yeah, like when you've taken out the competition yourself with a phenomenal image, and there's something to be proud of for sure.
Definitely. It's just a great anyone that's budding into astrophotography or night photography is well worth looking up the Marlin Awards and giving it a go, and it's just a great sort of community sort of event. So
probably open right now, hey?
Sorry?
It's probably open right now.
It is actually open now. I think it closes at the end of the month. So got to get in my button to gear and put a few things together.
Yeah,
but
I'm bothering this year, but
yeah, I'm assuming they probably have it as a virtual thing again with COVID the way it is. But normally they try and have a big event at Parks and.
I went this year to Parks and to the event. It was pretty cool. Have you been out there?
Yeah, I went to the event. I've been to a couple times, and it's a lot of fun. And the dish is quite a iconic sort of location in its own right. And I even did some astrophotography with the Milky Way above the dishes and things like that.
Yeah,
so,
it's pretty lit up at night, isn't it?
Yeah, conjures up memories of the film, of course. But
yeah. But yeah, I think I ended up spending more on flights and car hire than accommodation than what I ended up winning that year. But it was still a good experience to go.
One of those things where it's, and you get to meet some just phenomenal photographers and just great people in their own right as well. So it's a great experience if you ever get the chance, but it's a bit more of a challenge going all the way from Tassie to Parks for an event like that.
It's a good road trip for sure.
Mm.
You get to go to the Elvis Museum as well. What's not to like?
I didn't do that, but the Parks also has an Elvis festival with it every, I don't know what month it is, but yeah, that'll be fun. I know a guy that used to drive up from Melbourne to go to that every year, so yeah, it'd be a lot of fun too.
Yeah, lots from this night, but yeah, it was pretty cool. And then yeah, a bit of bioluminescence and really quite ordinary aurora,
but a beautiful clear night though. Look at that. Yeah.
And that's a bit of Steve.
Yeah, right. And a little picket fence there too.
Yeah, so this is all shot on a 50mm, I think. And it just stays pretty stationary in the sky. Like it flickers around a bit, but it stays in the same spot, so you can get a fair few minutes of it in the same location.
Wow.
And yeah, it always seems to be with the picket fence when I've seen it.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
If there's any relationship, but they always seem to be together when I've seen it.
Right. Oh, yep, there's a picket fence. That's a pretty good one too. You don't normally see it arcing across the sky so far. Yeah. Oh, yeah, double rainbow.
This is the iron pot at the end of the Derwent.
Oh, yeah.
Bruni in the background.
Great.
Yeah, I've got a bit of a thing about lighthouses. I quite like lighthouses as a subject.
You got Mitsuka as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's pretty phenomenal. Yeah, can't wait to see that.
Yeah,
that's the one I was mentioning earlier. Yeah, it's a very simple image in a lot of ways, but it's just you're lucky to see, but it can happen to get that sort of double arc, I guess, if it's a particularly bright
show. It didn't last long. It was pretty short and sweet. But yeah, this is just as blue hour was starting, and then it disappeared pretty quick, but carried on into quite a nice display after that.
Magic.
But yeah, I went to Mount Psycho a few years ago.
One of my favourites.
This is emanating you. Actually, I saw you had this composition of one of your first Aurora outings, I think.
Yes, I did, and that was by coincidence, I might add. But it's it's a very, very good foreground for
nice leading lines, isn't it?
And I think that was in a book recently too. I saw in the sort of near the front page.
Oh yeah, maybe. I think it was just a stock photo that someone.
Yeah, cool.
But yeah, I quite like that foreground. It's quite nice, but it's
it's very.
It's good to get away from the crowds down there. Hey?
You need to be very careful if you're going towards where that's taken, because it can get a bit sketchy.
Yeah, it's pretty slippy underfoot down there. Hey.
Just really love that one though. It's just got a beautiful sort of color palette to it with the blues.
Yeah, I think it's a blue hour foreground blended with the sky, maybe.
Yeah.
That's another good thing about doing time-lapse. You can do that sort of thing. That's
one of my faves of yours. Yeah.
Yes, this is up north. This is part of same night as the one that was on the cover photo, I think. So it must be April 20th.
Oh, right. Okay. But just a bit later on, a bit earlier on.
A bit earlier on, I think.
Okay.
The moon was still up a little bit.
I didn't realise that there was a bit of cloud there out that way. But I know that that's one of it was April 20 was such a big show and everyone hyped it up, and quite often, but it wasn't a lot of pre-talk about it. It sort of just happened.
No, it just kind of happened, hey.
Yeah, and
it was over fairly quickly too.
You had to sort of really scramble to work out what to do, and a lot of people that were big chasers were out to dinner and all sorts of things. And if people were just hoping to stay around Hobart and see it, it was just a no-go with the cloud. But fortunately, further north, there was actually some clear patches, and so I actually worked out to go into the Midlands where it was looking to be the clearest.
Oh, is this when you shot your portico one?
Yeah,
yeah.
The same. And so basically, I'll pull up the shot later, but you really have to calculate where the clear patch of sky is going to be and put yourself there, and then think quickly about what composition you're going to shoot. So I'll tell a story about that one when I get to that one myself. But it's an amazing evening. It's definitely the best aurora I've shot in the southern hemisphere that night.
Yeah, well, this night, so my partner's in St Helens, so I'd just driven up after work that night and got there and said hello. We were supposed to go out for dinner, but I grabbed my camera and went out shooting instead. And
it's not a bad place to have to travel to. I think it's probably the place with the clearest skies in Tassie, I reckon, up St Helens. So yeah.
So this is the first time I shot from this location, and
wow, yeah,
turned down dinner for this one, and it was quite a
very
nice
cool. Yeah,
it just kept on building, didn't it? It was almost had that double arc thing again.
Yeah,
going on. It kind of just met in the middle and then dissipated again. But yeah, it was quite nice.
So that was is that the same shot as the cover shot that we? Yeah. And I'd love to. You've got the centered Magellanic Cloud there as well, just up in the center. Magic.
And this was an all-nighter at Wineglass Bay.
Wow.
Again, it was probably the only part of the state that had clear skies that night. There was actually lightning on the southern horizon all night long.
Wow.
But it was crystal clear here all night. I got there just before sunset and stayed till the sun was well and truly up. So
did you bring a chair or something, or you just?
Well, there's kind of a bench at the lookout, and I kind of tried to lie down there and have a sleep at one stage, and woke up to a possum trying to steal a banana out of my camera bag, and he wasn't letting go of the camera bag, and neither was I, and we had this standoff, and but yeah, it was crystal clear all night long, even though you could see lightning all night as well.
I want to do something like that off Mount Amos as well.
I was just too lazy to walk.
Oh, it's a bit of a mission. It's definitely not for the faint of heart, that one. So
especially not after dark.
Going up from here, you can still get a really nice result. So yeah, imagine.
I'm in Braceland in 2 weeks' time for a week, so
awesome.
I might try and give it a go then, maybe. But we'll see. But I wasn't quite sure how much you'd see from the lookout, and the aurora didn't really peek over the top of the hazards there, but you could see enough of it to know what's going on.
It's great.
Classic view at the same time.
It
was quite nice. And it was kind of quite nice to have Wineglass Bay look out to yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's
normally so busy during the day.
It's a tourist trap normally.
Yeah.
I think they've just upgraded it too.
I think there's a second one now.
Oh, right.
A second one either just below or just to the side, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
So one camera lapsing shooting the Star Trail and one shooting panos, and
I really love the fact that you get into the pano aspect as well. It's something that I tend to avoid because of the complexity of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably well over 100 images in this one pano. I think it's a multi-row 50 mil. Yeah, quite a mammoth thing, but it had some pretty cool air glow off to the east that night too.
Do you use PD GUI to put them all together?
I use a combination of things because not any one thing will work at any one pano.
Yeah.
I use something called APP Auto Pano Pro, which I got with a student discount when I was at uni. Yeah. And it does a pretty good job. If it doesn't work, then I'll try Lightroom.
Yep.
And if it doesn't work, I resort to Hugin, which is like an old open source thing, which actually does a really good job on a lot of things. It takes forever, but it actually does stitch things which Lightroom doesn't stitch very often.
Yep.
I haven't forked out for PDUE yet, but I do like the idea of being able to paint in bits that you want to. Add in yourself as a selfie and all that sort of stuff. But I
bit the bullet on it, and it is pretty nice, especially also for doing HDR panos as well. But it's whatever works really at the end of the day. So
and I had someone interested in a whole sky 360 pano at one stage, and that was the only program I found that could do it.
Yep.
just on I tried the sort of the free version to start off with, just to see if it would work.
The other thing too is it's really hard to, like, for the stitching program to work out, because it all, you know, parts of that sky is going to look the same to the program. So working out where, you know, to overlay the different images would actually be really challenging for the software. So
yeah, I mean, this one isn't perfect when you know where to look, but it's good enough.
I guess you just hope that there's no astronomer looking and going, oh, that doesn't, that shouldn't be there. And
I guess with this one,
sort of like, I'm not going to show this one to David Malin. And
this one's probably almost 270 degrees, I think. And by the time you've gone from one end to the other, and then next row up, and then next row up, and next row up, the Milky Way core had set by the time I got to the top row. Wow. So, you know, it's a good half an hour.
That's a commitment. Yeah, that's a commitment.
If not more.
Magic. And do you use a like a pano head that you can adjust the?
I have got one, but most of the time I just use an L bracket.
Okay. And then just adjust the ball head up, and then
and I tend to overshoot the edges, so you can get away with that sort of distortion and crop that out at the end.
Yeah, I guess you don't have too much of an issue of parallax error in the foreground, because you don't have much foreground
there.
That's, that's normally what the biggest concern is. So
you can always underexpose that bit as well and hide it. So
yeah.
But yeah, I have got one and I have used it, but it's a bit of a faff to set up, and I never remember how many angles each lens is that I've got.
You have to take it with you everywhere then, and that's always
and it's just another thing to carry when you're already carrying 2 bodies and 2 tripods and half a dozen lenses. And
exactly.
So most of the time it stays at home. So no, I just tend to use an L bracket with or without a nodal rail, just to try and parallax a little bit. But most of the time I just use an L bracket. And if I haven't got that, I just put it into portrait and just deal with the wonky horizon afterwards. Yeah. This was my lockdown Aurora from last year.
Geez, you've got a good knack of finding good trees.
Well, this is on my daily walk from home. My home's just in the distance here, so this is just a short walk from home. But I've never actually shot it before, and I haven't shot it since. But it actually makes quite a nice foreground.
That's a pretty good one, yeah.
It is a good one. Yeah, it's got a nice hollow on the other side. But I just headed out to shoot a star trail really that night. I wasn't expecting an Aurora, and then kind of picked it up in the corner of the frame. And changed my orientation to suit. But yeah, I just got a tracker, and I was heading out to try and track the sky and then shoot the tree at the same time. But the Aurora kind of took over and took precedent in the end.
I guess that's the other great thing about if you're shooting auroras and the aurora doesn't happen, if it's clear sky, you can still do some astrophotography. So you don't really totally miss out. But of course, if the cloud comes through, then it's bad luck. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, that's another good thing about shooting time-lapse. You know, so I've got some motion control gear, but I don't tend to use it much for night sky stuff, because you can always stack your images for noise reduction. You can stack your sky to make it much better. You can run it as a
star trail if you wanted to as well.
You get so much out of the time-lapse other than just the time-lapse. The time-lapse is kind of
it really is almost a no-brainer to run a time-lapse on these sort of events, really, when all of the content that you can create out of one set of images. If you've got the hard drive space, that is, and the shutter count on your camera.
I think my Nikon must have shot well over 500,000 by now, and it's still and it's been dropped a few times, but it still seems to keep on keeping on. So
I've got a taste of the next one, and that one was that the one of the.
This
plane
is from the
ones?
flight.
Oh,
this is from the flight the other week.
You got a Milky Way shot from the plane.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think I was shooting 3-second exposures. I think, and it's not sharp, because it's never going to be sharp through an airplane window. But I was quite surprised with how much detail came out just out of a 3-second shot out the window.
That's amazing. Wow.
So yeah, it was.
What focal was that? About 24 mil or something like that, or?
I take it down at 20.
Yep.
Because my plunger got in the way if it was any wider than that.
Very important photographic piece of equipment.
Yeah, and I figured any wider than that, the airplane window edges would get in it as well.
Well, you should look at getting into the a business and getting some plunger.
Yeah, I went to Bunnings several times that week to get a kit.
Well, I know Paul's looking for something like that, so I'll have to let him know about the plunger idea. I reckon he'll be pretty happy about that because he's been trying to get a lens skirt thing coming over from the US, and I don't think it's going to make it in time for his.
Yeah, the other thing I've got for the next flight is just the little silicon lens hood things.
Okay, yeah.
But I don't know how necessary they'll be. But I did get some of those this week just in preparation.
Oh yeah.
So they certainly help. But I guess I plan to black out the whole window if I can.
Yeah, well, that certainly makes sense.
One of those that's just been adapted for my huge 24 mils.
Yeah,
24. So
obviously, it helps to wear all black as well, so you don't have any, there's no chance of getting reflections off of your clothing or anything like that.
Yeah, so I've got a bit of blackout curtain from Spotlight this week, which I'm just going to take over the window and block out the whole thing to try and cut out. So that although all the lights are off in the cabin, you still get some reflection from people that have their flash on or their. Yeah. And there's still some reflection off the seat numbers and the toilet signs and all that sort of stuff, which they don't switch off. And then
can't imagine they'd get the most amazing shot with the flash turned on.
You'd be surprised how many people have had to tell to turn it off. So.
Yeah, well, I guess there's not everyone's out there all the time like we are. So
right. And then they turn the lights on at seat swap time halfway, so that kind of spoils the time lapse a little bit. So blacking it out.
Magic, look at that. And was this a particularly big one, like in terms of what it would have been like for people on the ground in Tassie, for example?
No, this was KP1.
Whoa.
I thought we really weren't going to see anything. I did screenshot this.
KP1.
Yeah, it's KP1, and I think the solar wind speed was 300 and something.
Okay, wow. So that would definitely not be conditions that you'd want to go out for normally if you're looking for shooting from the ground.
No, and it was. I don't think the BZ ever got. Let me just stop screen sharing a second.
That's all right.
I'll stop doing it. This was the oval that night.
All right.
That was just before we took off.
So it's not really too aligned to Melbourne there by the looks.
No. Yeah. No, I thought we were flying into nothing. And the forecast, 334 and BZ of 1.
That's remarkable. Imagine
everyone else was really excited to get on the plane. I thought we weren't going to see anything.
A G1 or something, I mean that's just it's pretty astounding. But I guess it also makes it easier for organising a flight like that because if you can see something quite amazing even on such a low numbers, then it means that there's now moving into the maximum, they could be running the flights pretty often. You would have thought so.
So there's one from Perth this weekend, one from Brisbane next weekend, and then I'm back on another one from Melbourne in June.
It's a great way to also, you can't fly into overseas, so the sort of the airline industry is probably pivoting now and being able to do something else. So that's probably not a bad idea.
Yeah, but it was probably better that it was a pretty poor forecast, I think, because I've seen some of the clips from the New Zealand flights where they had a G2 storm, and it's pretty much just green the whole time out the window. It's just green. Whereas at least here you had some structure and some movement.
Yep. If
it had just been green, it would have just been green. You wouldn't have seen any of that definition, I guess. So it's actually quite good to be weak.
Well, that's true. Yeah, and it's not blowing out. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it would be really hard to photograph if it was any stronger, I think.
Yeah, it'd be almost too much to take in too, wouldn't it?
Yeah. But it was quite a weird experience. So everyone's masked up on board, but quite a surreal view out the window.
Well, I guess for a lot of people that would have been the first time they would have ever seen it too. So that's also it's a really nice way to be able to tick off the bucket list item rather than having to travel all the way to Iceland or something like that.
That's right.
So,
and then,
a lot cheaper by the sounds too.
Yeah, that's what I said to the guys. It's a whole lot cheaper and a whole lot quicker and a whole lot easier. You don't have to get freezing cold, and you'd have to spend several nights out in Iceland to see an aurora of that magnitude.
Oh yeah,
for that period of time.
You might only get it once or twice the whole visit over several weeks. And
Yeah.
I know people that travelled over there and they didn't see it the whole time, even though they were there.
I spent 5 days in Iceland a few years back, and the forecast was great every single night, but it was total cloud every single night. I got out of my little camper van for a wee in the middle of the night at Skogafoss, and there was a little patch of green between the clouds. And that's my Aurora photo from Iceland. So, but I did see it from, this is Northern Lights from Greenland on board a ship.
It's quite amazing. That looks like it's looking straight up pretty much.
Yeah.
So it's pretty amazing when you can just look up like that and it's almost raining down on you.
Yeah,
it's
very
hard to, you can't really capture it in any form, but seeing it with your own eyes is, it's if people haven't got it in their bucket list, they probably don't know they should have it on there, I think, because it's just a gobsmacking experience.
These images are these are only sort of half a second, I think I was taking these. This was on a rocking and rolling ship, so it was pretty hard to to photograph going down the coast of Greenland.
Challenge for sure.
Yeah,
I guess that's one thing too with Aurora photography. It's especially when it's big like this. You actually want pretty short shutter speeds to be able to get definition in the
half a second, but it's still blowing out.
Yeah, so you don't actually need. Again, the Aurora creates its own light, so a lot of sometimes you're shooting down to 5 seconds or even less than that, and the ISOs aren't really up like your 6400, but they're quite a bit lower as well. So. Wow, this is amazing location. For those that don't know where this island is, it's right off the bottom end of Tasmania, probably I guess it's the southernmost point of Tassie if it was actually attached to the mainland.
Yes, it's about 10 k's off the south coast.
Yeah,
it's part of the southwest wilderness.
Yeah. Probably get some of the harshest winds and conditions in Australia.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I do a lot of volunteer work for Wildcare, and I'd flown to Matsika that day to start a 10-day working bee, and very, very unusually for Matsika, we had a fairly clear week weather-wise, so clear skies, and as soon as the sun went down, you could see there was an aurora, and
You'd have been frothing pretty hard by
that
point.
But two nights out of the 10 we had Aurora. So.
Goodness me, knocked that one out of the park. And this is also a lighthouse where people, I think they do 3-month stints or something. They might.
Yeah, so you go as a caretaker for 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is on my bucket list of things to do. But
yeah, that would be amazing.
But yeah, it's a pretty special place, and so it's a big shearwater nesting colony as well. So I stayed up till after midnight shooting, I suppose, and then I thought I had to go to bed. I'd been up since 4 that morning to get there, and I just left my camera sort of tucked in against one of the buildings so the birds didn't fly into it when they came back at dawn. And hoped it was still there in the morning. But yeah, it was pretty phenomenal.
Wow, look at that.
So yeah, very, very lucky.
Subject too.
Yeah. Very lucky to have been there.
I don't know if there's too many shots taken from there with Aurora. It wouldn't be.
No, there's been a few with some of the recent caretakers have managed some good shots, and there's some historical ones as well. Actually, there's some film shots from back in the day, but it's pretty rare to get a clear sky there. You can see the sea mist rolling in the distance there, and that did obscure the lapse in the wee hours of the morning. But it was a pretty special place to.
Goodness me, yeah.
To photograph for sure.
Yeah, we're so far south there. That's the really unique part about it. So yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty special. Again, I had access to the lighthouse, but not access to the lantern at that point.
Yeah,
couldn't really light it up properly, but yeah, very, very awesome.
Yeah, I found with lighthouses too, or other buildings, it's well worth just, if you don't have access to the inside and there's no one actually in there or anyone that you're bothering, you can actually get a little light that you can shine from a place on the windowsill on the outside and just shine it inwards. And
that works pretty well for Cape Bruni, actually.
Lit up.
Yeah. That works pretty well for Cape Bruni if you shine it in through the back window there.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. Few spots like that. Yeah.
But yeah, that cycle was pretty spectacular.
very, very envious, I have to say.
Very cool. Yeah,
just even being there, let alone getting in Aurora, it's just pretty.
Yeah, I'm very, very lucky to have got there. I've been a couple of times, and I'm on.
Well, it sounds like you did some good work over there too. So
yeah, I'm actually on the committee for the wildcare group that manages it. So yeah, very lucky.
Mm.
Yeah, but yeah, pretty exceptional conditions that week. It's not often like that. It's more often it's blowing a gale and pouring rain. So yeah,
I guess that's the problem too. When you show all these beautiful Aurora pictures, it sort of sets an expectation for people that they're like, oh, yeah, just turn up, it'll be clear and it'll be nice. And you don't really ever show any pictures of when it didn't work. So
yeah, that's right.
It's one of those things.
Yeah.
Absolutely massive. Yeah, lovely shot. Just Did you do much stacking work or anything on to get out more clarity in the Milky Way?
The sky is stacked, and then the foreground's just a single image. But the sky is stacked. That's part of a time lapse, so it was pretty hard to stack because it was a motion time lapse with a sort of vertical pan.
Oh yeah. Do you have a particular program you used to use, like Starry Landscape Stacker or something like that?
How do I get out of that? For stacking, I use Starry Landscape Stacker.
Yep.
Or Starry Landscape Stacker for those sorts of shots, and the Starry Sky Stacker for deep space stuff.
Okay. So it's well worth always taking a whole bunch of frames just for those at home, and then you can actually use some software that actually will automatically put all those frames together. It's a really good noise reduction technique called median stacking, but there's some fantastic pieces of software out there that actually do all of the hard work for you, because it's doing it manually is an absolute nightmare. What's the one in Sequator? That's the Windows one that works quite well. I've been using that a bit lately, and that's been pretty nice. So
yeah, I think that Bruni one was it was part of a vertical. I'll show you the lapse and
yeah, please.
And so it was pretty hard to stack.
Oh, the distant one's awesome too.
This is my Lighthouse collaboration, which isn't much Aurora stuff because I've looked at every song makes pretty.
Get a nice star trail out of that as well, but
and so the possum knocks up on it.
Oh yeah, there we go. Nice. Oh yeah. The comet effect. Ooh,
that's my lighthouse scenes.
Tasty. Well, and that one would be on Vimeo as well. That whole video.
Yeah, that's on
Yeah, so
YouTube as well.
if you wanted to see the whole thing and probably in a much better quality than on Zoom, then yeah, definitely head over there. I'll add a link to your Vimeo on the description of the YouTube as well,
Yeah,
James. So
that one's on YouTube as well. That one. So
yeah, oh cool. There you go. So give James a subscribe as well on YouTube, and you might see some more stuff coming up. So be well worth it. Yeah, I might just chuck a few of mine up while we're talking about things. It's always nice to be able to show off your wares as such. All right, I'll just go back to this screen here. So I'm just going to bring up my, hopefully you can see all of that. I'm just going to go through a few and also just describe the different ways to shoot some of these scenes and what's going on. This is actually using a light pollution filter to dampen down some of the light that was actually cast over this scene. So sometimes, not normally you have to use a light pollution filter down here, but if you're getting a bit of glow or light pollution over some of your subjects, then that can actually help to balance that out a little bit. And you've got the western fall of the Milky Way, and then the Aurora on this side. So this is the sort of scene you'll get in around October, where you have the western fall on the western horizon, obviously, and then the Aurora on that side. And this is the sort of scene you'll get in the other, like around April. And this was actually on April 20, the event that we're talking about. What I really love, and James had a shot like this too, where you've got the Milky Way on the left, and then you can have a central subject, and then you have the Aurora on the right, and it sort of gives a nice sort of diagonal kind of composition there where you can put everything together.
It's an awesome tree.
Yeah, it's a cracker, that one, absolute cracker. We just found that by chance, so it was a very lucky find, that one. Then we've got something like this. So this was taken on the same evening. It was a great evening that kept on giving, really. We started shooting at this location, went to the tree that I just showed, and then actually ended up at Freycinet. So it was a big evening. But this is, if anyone's been on the Midlands Highway, there's an old portico. It's actually used to be a huge, big school. That's all that's left of it, and called Horton College. And we actually asked permission. Luckily, the people that own the property were actually out having a bonfire, and we went up to them and asked them if we could access, which was just amazing given the night that it was. Yeah, put a light in there to light it up a little bit, and had the amazing colors come over as well, which James had in his shot as well. And probably a similar moment, actually. You can sort of tell the similar timing where you have this sort of green blob coming over, and then the pink beams underneath that. Nice sort of sandwich of different colors going on there. So that's always an awesome thing to capture. This is another one sort of showing, I think this was in March. So you've got the again, a central subject with the Milky Way rising on the left and the Aurora on the right. It's always nice to try a few different angles, or using even some branches coming down here to help sort of they're all very delicately spaced out to not intersect too much with the elements, and also allow the Magellanic Clouds some space there in the sky as well. So you can have sort of fun composing shots like that. This is one from the same location with a bit of a picket fence that you can see coming across. So often the Aurora throws up different things at different times across the evening, I don't know if this one's got a bit of Steve there or what's going on there, but there's a bit of extra color coming out of the side of that one there as well. Then I've got a few here taken from overseas. So this was one that I was able to get in Lofoten in Norway, and had a really beautiful clear evening, and was able to get some reflections. You can actually see the water starting to ice up here in the distance. That's how cold it was. It was very, very, you could watch it ice up as you were shooting, basically. But thankfully it didn't ice up too much by the end of it, most of it was ice actually, but it was.
How big a moon was that, dude?
Hey?
How big a moon was that?
Look, I can't remember, to be honest, but there was a fair bit. It was just a really nice balance, actually. It was enough moon to light everything up without it being too strong that and the aurora itself was so bright that it gave off a fair bit of light in its own right. Yeah, and this was another one from the same night as well, it's a very well-known sort of feature in what's the name of the town? I can't remember now. That's there in the Lofoten area, Rainer, I think it is. Yeah, it was really nice to be able to explore a bit and actually find a part where I could actually get down to the water, which you don't see too many shots of this actually reflected in the water like this. So that was quite nice. But yeah, some amazing conditions there. And this one here is it was an interesting shoot for the fact that I was camped out in a camper van, which in Norway in winter's not the best of things to do anyway. And then unfortunately my heater in the camper van had stopped overnight, and I woke up in my sleeping bag and the bottle of water next to me was frozen. So I was pretty cold in the camper, needless to say. And so I had to get up and turn the heater on just so that I could still function as a human. And when I got out of the van, the aurora was going. So I was like, oh, well, that was my wake up call, I guess. So thankfully I was nice and cooled down already, so I didn't have to worry about the temperatures outside, and I was able to go and chase the aurora over. I think this is on, it's the famous surf beach, which the name escapes me now, but people are crazy enough to put giant wetsuits on and go out surfing on this beach. Have
you seen them surfing under the aurora?
Yeah, that's where I'm pretty sure it's the same beach where I think, what's his name? I
forget his name. That's a pretty amazing project, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember the guy. I'm struggling to remember things at the moment, but yeah, that's definitely an amazing location. This is one a bit more recent as well, just taken locally, just with a nice little glow in the background, with a beautiful jetty in the foreground. So just a small selection there of some of my shots, but definitely yeah, just a lovely sort of pursuit, aurora chasing. It's definitely feel very privileged to be able to be down in Tassie and be able to do that. I guess it's one of the reasons why I even moved down here to start with, and I know a few other guys actually that moved down for a similar reason, among others, of course, but it's definitely one of the deal sweeteners if you're wanting to move to Tassie, because nothing beats, as I say, being Johnny on the spot when the aurora is on. It's very hard to jump on a plane and travel domestically and try and be it on when the aurora is going off. So that's pretty good. It's pretty good. I'm just checking to see if we got any comments at all on YouTube, because I haven't been able to have a look at that. I think it's more just a bit of chit chat going on over there. Yeah, it was Chris Bacard. Thanks very much for that. Boogers on YouTube. And so no, that's all great. So well, normally sort of getting to the time where we wrap up the show. And so I guess I want to do a bit of a plug, and just as I mentioned a bit earlier, you would have seen the beautiful time-lapse footage from James of the Cape Bruni Lighthouse. So we are running astrophotography workshops. Well, I'm with the Bruni Island photography guys running them over on Cape Bruni, on Bruni Island, and that's going to be in July, and we're just setting up another date in October as well. So hopefully get a bit of aurora over there, and also we can't promise that, of course, and but definitely if we've got lucky enough to have clear skies, get some astrophotography as well as just your sunrises, sunsets, nature, waterfalls, you name it. So there's plenty to do over there. So
great location, hey. It's just I spent 6 weeks there, and I think I've got over 35,000 images from there.
Yeah. And you were working with the lighthouse or something?
Yeah, I was caretaking down there, so I was living in one of the lighthouse.
What a gig! You've got this knack of finding good gigs like that too. I noticed. So
just all volunteer stuff gets you places.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I mean, you get the rewards for all of the hard work that you do. So it's easy to see the outputs when you're still doing plenty of great work there too. So good on you for doing that, James.
Just gets you to spend lots of time in pristine locations. It's great.
Yeah,
Maximizes the chances of getting clear skies.
Yeah, that's everyone wins there, really, doesn't it? That's the best outcome. Awesome. Well, I would also just mention that next week we've got an episode on bioluminescence. So if you're interested in bioluminescence, we've actually got Fraser Johnson joining us, and he is an amazing videographer, cinematographer based down here in Hobart, and he's done extensive work with both glowworms. I think he's done a bit with ghost fungi, but also sea sparkle bioluminescence. So it's quite a unique mix of different bio that we get down here. It's not just the sea sparkle, which you see quite a lot in pics. So it should be an absolutely fascinating episode, and he's got some amazing time lapse and video footage of bio, and we can talk a bit about that as well. So really looking forward to that. And that's show 49. And then show 50 is actually going to be a very special episode. And I don't have the graphics with me, but it's going to be a Peter Dombrovskis special. And so we've got some amazing special guests lined up for our 50th show. And we'll have some more information about that shortly as well. But yeah, very excited about that. So some great episodes coming up. And so, yeah, it's some things to keep a lookout, an eye out for. Thanks so much again, James, for joining us. It was really, really lovely to finally meet you after all this time, and we have to go out for a shoot one day.
Absolutely.
It's be a lot of fun, I reckon. It's funny like that when you live in the same place, but don't, like, normally you bump into someone after a period of time, but just hasn't quite happened that way, but that's all good. Look, yeah, and thanks for joining us tonight, and please tune in at the same time next week for more Talking Landscape Photography. Until then, I'll catch you guys later. Nice to see you all.